Hi everyone, this is the WildFly community call for April 2nd, so no April Fool's Day, no joke today. I think the main point on the agenda is about the Jakarta E10 and 11 work that we're doing for WildFly. So let's keep the WildFly release schedule because it's really, it will be discussed for that work. Do you want to share the slide, Brian, or do you want me to do it? Okay, we'll stop presenting.
All right. So kind of the main thing to talk about today is just what's going on in WildFly with E10 and moving to E11 in particular. I mean, this is all relevant because it's all going to happen over either WildFly 40, which is soon done, or WildFly 41, which is basically our July release. The basic thing, just part of this is to just share information with people about where we are, and the other is to continue thinking about how hard to push on some of these things for WildFly 40. Because we're actually quite late in the dev cycle for WildFly 40. We're kind of meant to release the beta next Thursday. But on the other hand, getting E11 out is pretty valuable, I think, in general for our users. And also, I'll get more into the details of this, but we want to do an E10 feature pack, which is actually it's important for all the people, a lot of developers. It's going to help us a lot if we do that for our other job duties besides WildFly, EAP particularly. There's no secret about that. It helps. EAP needs to support EE10, and it will, and it helps us if we do this feature pack for doing that part of our jobs, which is important. But it's also important for our users because it gives them a ability to continue using EE10 for a little while after we move to EE11. Basically, that's just an intro slide of what I want to talk about here. Stop me as we go along, not here, but as we go along if you have any questions. So just quickly about the schedule. So currently, I mentioned, I mean, we're in the end stages for WildFly 40. We're supposed to tag next Wednesday, and then it'll all be available next Thursday. I think these things, though, personally, depends on how the community as a whole feels, but I'm fairly flexible about this, actually. We try to be time boxed, but I've said in the past, and other people have said, really big things like EE versions, we're comfortable being a little bit flexible about the time boxing.
And then that was the case for Jakarta E10. We delayed WildFly until we could release with E10, if I remember correctly.
Probably, yeah. It wasn't a big deal. I know that we definitely for a long. Yeah, I guess we did because we didn't. Yeah, there was a long time we didn't do feature boxing or time boxing at all. Yeah, that was E10. Yeah.
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 Yeah, I remember because we also did several micro release of the previous WildFly to leave some time for people to stay on E9.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that was, I would not want to ever do. Hopefully, we'll never have any reason we need to do that kind of thing again, because that was a really long time. Here, I'm talking like maybe a couple weeks kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that we definitely did that. And more in the couple weeks kind of thing. I think at least once or twice for micro profile, we've delayed things by a week or two because a lot of times the micro profile releases tend to come out maybe like 2 weeks too late for our cadence. They just don't align quite right. So we end up, let's spend a couple weeks and implement this thing rather than get to the schedule. So I think hopefully what I'm talking about here is more of that kind of nature rather than the E10, which was a complete breaking namespace change of everything. This is much smaller. Okay, then WildFly 41, we're going to be pretty strict about these dates, I know, because we got a bunch of contributors that need to move on to other things, and we have to be ready particularly by the PR freeze on June 17th for 41 beta. So 41 beta is going to be out in late June and final in July. That's just FYI. Okay, the third kind of factor here is the security manager. So basically, at some point, WildFly is going to need to remove security manager support because, first off, it doesn't work anymore in Java SE25. If you try to enable the security manager at runtime, your process won't start. So The APIs are still there. Code that uses them can still exist, but there's no functionality behind them. But it's quite clear that eventually, and I don't know exactly when, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's maybe the next LTS release. So that would be SE29. That they'll actually remove the APIs. I know OpenJDK wants those gone. They've been very patient. Probably by the time they were moving, it will be 10 years since the time they started pushing people to stop using them. So they've been very patient. So anyways, that's, people in the ecosystem know that's coming, and there's definitely a big momentum now of people wanting to rip out the security manager APIs from their code, so that they're not up against a deadline. They want to get it done, and that's definitely affecting us because we have hundreds of components, and as soon as one rips it out, we can't support it anymore. And on the other hand, those components are being nice, and they're saying, hey, we don't want to break you, but please let us know when you're going to stop needing this so that we can move on. So WildFly 42 is basically when we're going to stop supporting it and people can move on. And what that means, though, is that beginning with WildFly 42, so the October release, we won't be able to support E10 anymore. So that's the end of EE10. Beginning of EE11 is as soon as we can, and the end of EE10 is October. So that's just context. All right, so now about where things are in EE11. We're very close to being EE11 compatible, passing all the compatibility tests. James mildly nodded, so he's the one, him and Scott are the ones who know the best about where we are, and I think that's basically true. There's the remaining significant pieces. We got 3 security specs that need to be wrapped up, and those are definitely in progress, making rapid progress. And those are mostly Darren Lofthouse, who he's definitely not told me, no, we're not going to get this done, it's going to take forever. He's more in the mode of, yeah, we're going to get, we're going to give it do our best and try to get it done. So knock on wood. We need an update of Undertow Jasta, which is our Jakarta pages and tags implementation, and that's pending. I know that should be coming. That's not a big deal, as far as I know. No, and I'm pretty sure it's not, because the changes in pages for EE11 are very small. And then a minor detail is we need to be able to run the connector part of the TCK, which is work in progress, and that's not expected to be a problem, because that's just changing how the TCK works. There was no changes in connectors for EE11, so there's no reason that we're going to have any issues with not passing, because it's the same test we already passed for EE10. So those, I think, there's a number of other little minor fiddly things we're going to have to do to be formally done, but those are the significant pieces. So the basic thing, I think this is highly achievable by our April 22nd WildFly preview, or WildFly 40 final tag. So I think there's very good reason to be confident that we'll be done. And missing by a few days, I would for sure say, oh, let's shift the date by a few days to finish this, because it's an important thing. Yeah, Jeff?
You mentioned the WildFly preview final tag, but we are using a single tag for all WildFly. So you're not talking about delaying.
I wrote WildFly preview tag, and then when I stumbled the words, and that was exactly why. But I spoke. Okay. It's all the same tag. It's WildFly is the 40 tag, and preview is just another piece that comes out from the same tag. Yeah, which is actually a lot of our community might not know that, so it's good now they do. And it's even possible will be done in time for the 40 beta tag. An important thing here is that it doesn't really. We've been shipping a progress on EE11 in WildFly preview for many quarters now. So whether we're done in beta versus final doesn't really matter. We're kind of quite open to making changes between beta and final in WildFly preview that we're the kind of things we're reluctant to do in standard WildFly. We tend to say, yes, things have to be in the beta, or else we're not going to ship them in final. Whereas if WildFly it's preview, we're much more open to okay, keep changing things up to the last second. Okay, so anyways, I think it's highly achievable that WildFly preview will be 11 by WildFly 40. Okay, but now what about standard WildFly? So once we're compatible in preview, it's actually pretty quick to change standard WildFly. It's maybe a day's work in the main code base to take some things that are specific to preview and instead, move them around a little bit in the code, just do a little small refactoring, and boom. Now it's standard WildFly that provides it. So that's pretty easy. We need to do a new major release of the MyFaces feature pack, but again, that's pretty simple. It's basically a matter of, I think, a couple component upgrades and a release. I think so. It's not a big deal to do that, and that's because MyFaces feature pack provides Jakarta faces. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Out of curiosity, if we do that and put E11 in standard WildFly, would there be any difference for that release between WildFly and WildFly preview? Is there other things in preview that would be different?
Yeah, there's always a few things. I mean, the big one for this is a separate thing we should discuss sometime. A big one is WildFly preview does not provide the embedded messaging broker in its out of the box configs. Which I don't know if we're ever going to stop doing that in standard WildFly. So at some point, we should probably maybe just stop doing it in WildFly preview, because it's not really previewing something that's ever going to happen. And it's actually, to be honest, it makes our life harder, because it particularly makes it harder to test WildFly preview, because testing messaging is hard because it doesn't have the config. So, and there's a couple other things. There's some things I know about Hibernate Search has some stuff. And there tends to be other little, I think there's the Vertex, maybe the Vertex subsystem is there. So,
okay.
Yeah, there's always a few little things, Typically the biggest one is the E version, but it kind of goes up and down how different they are. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And then another thing we'd need to do is just to adapt the TCK runners. And this actually relates to the messaging thing that I talked about. The TCK runners assume they have to add an embedded broker into our configs because for type WildFly preview, but for testing standard WildFly, we don't have to do that. So, so there's that. All right. So a key question is, if we're compatible in April for WildFly preview, do we want to delay and go ahead and ship it and delay WildFly 40 and go ahead and ship it in WildFly 40 instead of waiting 3 more months for something that's actually a few days work? So that's one question. Yeah.
How does that impact, the downstream project that depends on WildFly? For example, if we switch to E11 in April, does that mean that all the ecosystem around WildFly, quick start, things like that, must be also ready at the same time? Maybe maybe we'll discuss that later.
No. That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, everything would have to switch. Yeah.
Okay.
Which, yeah, it's a good point. I mean, when I wrote this slide, I kind of thought through what all that means. And I don't think it's like particularly impactful for quick starts. But I mean, it's a good point. We have to double check that. I mean, I don't think other things break, because the reality is E11 and E10 are highly compatible. As long as you're not using security manager doesn't work at all in E11. But our downstream of the main server stuff, like the quick starts, I think we're running security manager in the quick starts. So
yeah, I'm thinking of quick start. Maybe there's other project, but how much pressure would we put to other project if we do the switch in April against leaving until July for people to align with that?
Yeah, well, that kind of gets into the next bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Which is the dual support thing. Basically, what we've been talking about for a year or two now is the idea of providing on a short-term basis an extra variant of standard WildFly that's it's got the same stability guarantees and all that stuff as standard WildFly. It's not like WildFly preview where there's a bunch of preview functionality that works out of the box and all that stuff. But basically provide a variant that still provides the E10 APIs. So the typical one, if people don't do anything and they just keep using their existing provisioning, for example, or they go to they download the zip, they poke around and they say, okay, this is the zip I want to download. Don't do that. Use provisioning. It's better. But anyways, you get EE11, but we'll provide an alternative, basically, that provides E10 for a little while, maybe a couple quarters. And that'll allow people to continue to, if you've got your applications that use E10, you can still get bug fixes. Maybe there's some new feature that's coming that you want to use, but you're not ready to transition your stuff over to E11 yet. Change all your bombs and rebuild using even though it shouldn't make any difference. Anyways, do whatever you have to do for your application. Give you a couple quarters to do that. That's the idea here. And I'm going to be really honest, that also helps most of the contributions of WildFly come from people who work on EAP. And the people who work on EAP, we need to continue to support E10 for a while because EAP still supports it. So having this kind of functionality makes me and for most of the people on this call, our lives easier too. So there's benefit to our community and there's benefit to the contributors who, have only so many hours a day to do things, and doing things this way, what makes it more feasible to get the most work done. So basically we're talking about providing an E10 feature pack. And I'll talk more about all that means. Now we really can only provide this for a couple quarters because I mentioned before in WildFly 42, we're not going to provide this anymore because we're going to remove all the security manager code. So the whole idea behind this is the vast majority of the code between E10 and E11, particularly in the app server itself, and even in between the components, it's the same. There's I think I did an analysis, out of our 400 something components, maybe 80 of them are different, and the other almost 500 components and maybe 80 something differ. And those come actually from only besides the Jakarta APIs themselves, which is 30 things, there's a handful of projects provide the bulk of those differences. Like REST Easy itself provides 10. So there's not that many things that are different, which is what makes it doing this kind of separate feature pack feasible. But it's not feasible once the WildFly, all the components start to change a lot because we drop security manager. Okay. So this is basically something that we could do for a couple quarters.
You mentioned in your user stories, CVs, and general bug fixes. Are we thinking of also extending the number of micro releases for the last WildFly to support Jakarta EE10, or not necessarily?
Oh, we could. Yeah, we are thinking because we're talking about it.
Okay.
Right. You asked the question, and I mean it's a valid point. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going back to the E9, where we did more micro releases that we usually do. So I was wondering if it's also on the table.
Yeah, it's a possibility. I mean that's that's something let's say for E11 when WildFly 40 we dropped it. We just moved to E11. Another thing we could do besides instead of the dual support, we could just provide more micros. It's another way to satisfy the community need. Or, after we drop, even if we drop in 42, we could potentially provide more micros. Although there, I'm kind of saying, well, we already gave you 6 months by doing this E10 feature pack for 6 months. So, yeah. I mean, a fundamental thing for people to understand is it's a lot of work even to do a micro. It's a lot of work. Because you have to run all the TCKs, which take, we're talking 70,000. You have to run the TCKs, and there's a lot of deliverables. There's many different feature packs, and it's a big deal to do a micro release of WildFly, which is one of the main reasons we only do one. So, but I mean, it's definitely, there's certain cases where we should think about continuing to do them, and this would definitely be one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of along those lines, something I've always kind of thought about, and I don't know if this is the right place to discuss it, but I will anyway, is I've wondered if for something like this, if it's because typically any kind of CVE we have is very rarely in the WildFly code base. I mean, it happens, but it's pretty rare. It's usually a component. So, I mean, in theory, we could like just release, I mean, it would be a provision time only thing, but we could release channels with component elements. And then for people that want like a CVE fix, they just have to re-provision basically.
Yeah, I would really love us to make that kind of a point of emphasis once we get past this EE11 thing, and that, because I mean, the technology is there. We have it. We just haven't properly like adapted to it. You know, I don't know, just polish it a little bit, make it easily consumable and all that stuff within the WildFly ecosystem.
Yeah, I think it makes sense too. I mean, and it allows people to stay on a release a little bit longer until they're like really ready to move. And I mean, it just kind of pushes people towards the provisioning mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is a very good thing. So yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I definitely think we should. There's been a few times where something comes along and it's like, oh, should we do another release? And it's like, no, it's too much. We just, you know, it'd be better. One thing I do want to emphasize though is that's not free either.
No.
Yeah. Because I mean, it means you don't have to do things like some of the deliverables. You don't, well, sorry, these are all like internal words that I, deliverables. I mean, the deliverable is if you think of something that I, as a user, can go out and consume. Somebody put it out there and publish something and I can go consume it. That's a deliverable, right? So like a zip is a deliverable as opposed to a feature pack, which is a different one. So basically by using a channel, we're having fewer deliverables because we just push out basically a YAML file. That's all we have to publish. But you still have to test it. You still have to run all the TCKs. You have to do all that behind the scenes work to make sure it's good. So it's not free.
Right, for sure.
But it's definitely a lot cheaper than a full release. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would love to have us be more capable of doing that and have like better documentation of how to consume it and all that stuff. Which I think there's actually work in that been going on.
Yes, Pedro has working so that from any WildFly installation, whether you're using provisioning or you are downloading a zip, you then can use provisioning for this installation to update it. And then where we could have channels to update that. Either consuming channels coming from us where we have tested things, everything together, or the user can bring their own new dependencies, new component upgrades inside their installation.
Yeah. And that's moving along too. I think that's,
yes.
Yeah. So I think that's like the key missing piece in this. Well, besides documentation and all that, which is always hard.
Yes.
But in terms of the actual fundamental technology, I think that's the main thing. Is just the nice tooling experience to be able to do the updates.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think we already provide the stuff in the server itself to make it updatable. We already provide there's within the server, there's data we record inside the server installation that the tools then use to figure out how to upgrade it, and that stuff's in place. So I was tapping my desk and Google Meet said reducing noise. I'll try to be less handsy as I talk. All right. So yeah, that would be a nice way for this general use case of how to let people keep up. You know, another good solution. Okay. So if we do this EE10 variant, what are we talking about? So the main things, we're talking about a new feature pack. Okay. So we provide, most people when they consume WildFly, they use a feature pack called WildFly. Which actually has one dependency, which is another feature pack called WildFly EE. And WildFly EE probably provides 90% of the functionality in the server. And then WildFly depends on that and adds 10% more, like microprofile and some observability stuff. That's how it works. So we would introduce a new WildFly EE10 that's analogous to WildFly EE. WildFly EE would move on to providing EE11 APIs and implementations, while EE10 would still provide EE10, and then large majority of stuff would still be shared between the two. All the core infrastructures like Electron and there's all sorts of core stuff would still be shared between the two. So we provide a new feature pack. probably a zip and a tar. That would use this feature pack, but it would also use the WildFly on top of the feature pack, and so it would provide all the micro profile and stuff. So it would be a zip that would be equivalent to like a WildFly 39 download zip, except for the updated whatever updates come in the standard WildFly. We don't have to provide a zip, but I think why not? We provide bombs. So you need to have bombs that still specify the E10 APIs rather than E11. Jeff and I, we talked. We can go ahead and do container images, and then we provide a channel and a manifest, which is what we talked about before. In the last little section, it's a thing that allows you to update stuff. I don't think people use them that much with WildFly, but we would provide them. Okay.
You're mentioning micro profile. Is there how would the switch from E11 impact micro profile?
So technically, meaning do things work? It's fine. For example, WildFly Preview passes. WildFly Preview has been providing for a long time all the micro profile APIs. And we run the TCKs in all of our own test suites against WildFly Preview, and everything passes. So, technically, there's no problem in terms of how our implementations work and stuff like that. Legalistically, I guess what this would mean is we would no longer declare, once we move to E11, we would no longer declare WildFly as compatible with microprofile 7.1, because legalistically the language says you're supposed to use EE10 as a base. And I know within microprofile, one of the things they're going to do with microprofile 7.2, James, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things they're going to do with 7.2, it's still microprofile 7, right? So it's still going to base on EE10. But they're just going to change some language in the spec that says, oh, it's okay to use E11 too. So in other words, they've recognized that it's better if their spec language is more flexible so that people like us. So as soon as 7.2 comes out, we'll implement it, and then we'll be compatible again. So we're going to have to do in terms of like how we state things legalistically in terms of what we are. I guess that'll be a task for me in particular, like how I write things and stuff like that. But in terms of functionality, it's going to work fine. That's a great question. So provisioning. So conceptually, there's been some talk in the past. I think maybe on this call. I think Jean-Francois, maybe you did a presentation. I don't know if you did it on this call or somewhere else, but I was talking about
on that call. It was on that call.
Okay, cool. So this is we talked about this late last year some, and this is an important thing that Jean-Francois implemented is the concept of a family. Feature packs can belong to a family, and then another feature pack. You depend on a particular base feature pack, like WildFly depends on WildFly EE, but you can also say, but anything from the same family is okay. So that's basically the little technical thing inside that allows then somebody to, when they're doing provisioning, to say, oh, use WildFly EE10, don't use WildFly EE. Yeah, and this is the basic thing that's going to allow all of our people that use all the other feature packs. They can do provisioning just by declaring I want to use WildFly EE10, and still provision and still get the other feature packs we provide. So a critical one obviously being the WildFly feature pack that brings microprofile and observability and stuff. The data sources feature pack works already with this family notion. Cloud works already this way. AI feature pack works already this way. So it's a matter of, I don't have a code example here, unfortunately. I didn't have time to write one, but anyways, it's a matter of how you declare things in your POM. Jean-Francois, if you got a couple minutes when this call is done, I want to talk to you about a couple things. So that's basically what you do to use this. You just have to declare that you want to use the WildFly EE10 feature pack as a book. and your provisioning setup. We need to make some pretty trivial updates to some other feature packs that don't yet support this family notion. But if I understand it correctly, it's like a one-line change to the feature pack, so it's not a big deal. There's 3 other ones here that we'd have to make a quick change to when we do this, and that would allow people to use those feature packs. Other things we don't intend to do. So basically the whole point of this is not to do new E10 development. It's to like people that already have something working to let them have further support. So we'd not be doing an E10 version of the quick starts anymore. You know, once we move, the quick starts move to E11. Same thing with the archetypes, you know. And I think the OpenShift images, they're basically, you just provision what you provision, you know. They're how you set up your provisioning determines what runs inside your OpenShift image. So we don't need to change anything with the OpenShift images, which is good. Testing. So we already have a huge test suite that knows how to test the E10. You know, it's doing it as we speak. There's probably 20 different jobs running out there that are testing E10. This is a big to-do for me over the next few days, is basically to polish this up. We'd add a profile to the WildFly test suite so that when we run all the normal standard WildFly tests, they'll run against the new feature pack or the new distribution built from that, as opposed to running against the E11 one. That's basically, there's there's stuff to do to make it happen, but in terms of the tests themselves, we know they work because they're running right now, and we know our tests work against the E11 because we're running them against WildFly Preview already. And then we continue to run the TCK. We're running the E10 TCK every day, so we keep doing it. We just swap out what installation we're testing, and we'd want to add some smoke testing of the other feature packs just to verify that the installation using E10 works. Okay, so that comes us back to the very first slide, but more. It's just like a big question is just how hard do we want to push on to try to get this done for WildFly 40?
I have 2 questions before we try to answer that one. Is there any relation with the Java 25 support, or it's not relevant for E11?
No, there's no particular relation.
Okay.
Well, I'll go on a tangent, but I mean, there are relations, sure. But no, I mean, so E11 itself requires, actually, it only requires SC17. Yeah, definitely. We actually, James, I think in particular, and a bunch of us, we made a significant push to, because they wanted to require SC21, and then there was basically 0 things in EE11 that actually made it so it wouldn't work on SC21. I think there was hardly anything. So we pushed and said, hey, we should continue to support SC17 so our users don't have to make a jump for no reason.
Okay.
So it does. So there's no, and actually E11 came out well before SC25, so it doesn't even contemplate it.
Okay.
We know for a fact it's the TCKs won't pass on SC25 because there's just a few, TCKs are tens of thousands of tests, and there's a few of them that have some little thing that doesn't work quite the same. But anyways, where this comes from, part of qualifying SC25 to say this is the recommended SE for WildFly is we run those TCKs on SC25, and we use them as like a massive test suite looking for things that don't work right in WildFly. And the results are really good. Okay. So the TCKs themselves, even though they have a few things that don't work, they have tens of thousands of things that do work. So
and the second question is about documentation. Because we are making a service to extend the lifespan of application running on E10, but they will have to change some things to continue to work, either changing the archive that they are downloading or the provisioning, the Maven artifact. So I think we need to have some migration, or I don't know, guide documentation about that in time for final. Not necessary for beta, but we need to have that for final.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, there's an analysis document about this that talks about that a little bit. But I definitely didn't put it on the slide, which tells you that it's not high enough in my mind as it needs to be. So yes, but you're right though. That is something that we don't publish docs for the beta, so it doesn't have to be done for a beta, but it definitely has to be done because if there's no docs, what's the point? People aren't going to know how to use it.
Yeah. Sorry, just to be clear, we are not thinking of having a beta and a final release of WildFly, but would have different EE version. Doing beta with E10 and final with E11. The beta and final must be aligned with we won't switch between them.
Yeah, that is where it becomes the hard part here. Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we wouldn't do that.
Okay.
Which means basically we're talking about WildFly 4D beta, which is really, really imminent.
Yeah.
So we could push it out. Well, it's possible, first off, that it's going to be it is possible that early next week we'll feel, yeah, this is pretty good, or good enough for a beta. Because I mean, the key thing there in particular is well, yeah, we'll have to think it through more. But maybe on Tuesday we can decide what we want to do. I think if by Tuesday it's like, oh God, we're not even close, then we have to say, okay, this isn't going to work. But maybe by Tuesday, we'll see where we are with the security stuff and with the stuff I'll be doing over the next few days about the alternative, the E10 feature pack. Those are the two big chunks of work. And kind of see where we are on Tuesday and decide if we want to try to go for it or not. Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. I mean, it's always possible too that people just say, this is too much. We just can't do this. This isn't right. Let's just worry. Let's focus on WildFly preview and deal with the E10 feature pack stuff later and switch standard WildFly later. Which would be a reasonable thing to do. So,
okay.
So
what are the data points you need to make the decision on Tuesday? It's your own work on the E10 feature pack.
Yeah, and if my own, that and people have a little bit of a look at it at least. Yeah, that's the key one. And then really, I think the security stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, those are I think the two key ones. I'm pretty confident that we'll have Jasto done. It's not a big deal. So the security stuff is still in progress, and we'll see whether it gets wrapped up, and then the feature pack itself. Yeah. So. So that's kind of, any thoughts? Right.
I think it sounds excellent.
I
think it sounds excellent.
Well, it'd be nice to get it done for sure. It's just how much how much trust we want to put in live, or how much we're willing to push things out a little bit in order to make it happen. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If we are talking about delaying beta, does that mean that we would also delay the final release, or just compress the time between them?
That's a great question. No, I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, we could. Yeah. I mean, we don't get huge amounts of feedback on our betas.
Yeah.
I mean, first off, 2 weeks is always pretty short given the size of WildFly. And what that 2 weeks is primarily doing is our own daily CI and all the people, all the WildFly developers. It's really 2 weeks where those people are noticing things.
Yeah.
it's much less that, you know, end users are running the beta and telling us problems. That happens occasionally, but not that much. So, you know, it's valid that we could shorten that if we wanted to.
Yeah. Or delay the final if we don't need to put pressure if we are talking about 1 or 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is there's a fairly significant CVE in Artemis that will be fixed in WildFly 40.
Okay.
So the other thing is, okay, we do a 3902 to work around that. Yeah, that is the one thing. Besides, just it's nice to get things, keep getting things released. That's the only other factor. Is let's try to get this done. But no, it's a good point. I mean, how long we have between a beta and final is kind of our own decision. So we could, yeah. So we'll see. I want to thank everybody because this last month and a half, there's been a lot of people doing a lot of really good work to get us where we are. So, and James in particular, I think we're in good shape for E11. So it hadn't been a huge focus for a while because people had other things they had to deal with, but we've kind of made it a bit of one in the last month or so and made really rapid progress. So, the other part of that though is actually within WildFly preview, a lot of it has actually been in place for a long time. That's the other thing. So E11 has been being tested in WildFly preview. Most of the substantive changes have been in place for a long time. Like the persistence implementation, rest easy, those are the, those things have been there for a long time. So, which is good. We're not like suddenly putting something in brand new that hasn't been getting out there, getting big for a long time. All right.
I have added, sorry, Brian, I've added to the meeting notes a link to the presentation that Jean-François did about WildFly family, since you mentioned that. And I've also added a link to the main thread that you started on WildFly Dev because it contains the analysis. I think that go in much more details than what you have presented here.
Yeah. Stop presenting, so. Oh, great. Thank you. All right.
Okay. That was quite a big topic. Anything else that people want to discuss?
All right.
In that case, we can keep the meeting short. Thanks, Brian, for the presentation and the work.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, yeah, I'm there, Brian.